Over the centuries, there have been many masters that have come along to show us the way, the truth about ourselves. But how can we best follow their example and learn how we ourselves can be masters? Now today, we are at a special 9-day retreat in Romania at this beautiful resort called Kila. And we had a very interesting discussion about this topic. So I'm going to share that with you now and share some stories about Lester Levinson and what he experienced when he went free and what we can learn from his example. So I think you'll find this very interesting. And as I play this for you, I'm going to just take you for a walk along these beautiful grounds. So enjoy the talk and enjoy the beautiful visuals and enjoy the evolution of your own beingness. And you see how easy this is? It's not complicated. You see you're doing it. You've been in charge all along. It was your decision to go down into that problem of wanting. You started that, and now you let it go, and you see that you have always have been in control. You've been in charge of your whole story. And do you feel more approval? Do you feel more love now that you're not looking for it? You feel lighter, right?
I feel in the middle, yeah.
Yeah, and where is that approval now?
Nowhere. I mean,
Well, it's not out there, but you feel it. Where do you feel that lighter feeling, that love? Where is it? Well, don't you feel it inside of you? That lighter feeling?
that lighter feeling, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's been inside of you all along. And this is the problem that we have with relationships, all of us, is that we're expecting the other one to give us love. But there's no discrimination going on. You see, you want your husband's approval, right? All right, well, let me ask you this. Does your husband approve of himself?
I don't know.
Does he beat himself up? Does he get frustrated?
Frustrated, yes, but verbally he doesn't beat himself up.
Well, not verbally, but
Yeah.
he disapproves of himself, right?
Maybe
He gets
he's
frustrated.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't love himself.
He's very proud, so I think he loves himself. So
Pride is not love. Pride is wanting to be better than others. That's not love. So he really doesn't love himself, does he? Not like what we're looking at here, not like what you're experiencing,
yeah,
right? So if he can't give it to himself, how do you expect him to give it to you?
I guess it's impossible.
And that's true of every relationship. We're all looking for our partner to give us approval, and they can't. And most of the people out there in the world, they don't know how to love themselves, and we're expecting them to love us. It's like going to a bankrupt bank, asking for a loan. They can't give it to you. They're bankrupt. And when we don't get it, what happens? We get upset, right? And how loving is that? And see, this is what most of us call love. As long as you do what I want you to do, I love you. If you don't do what I want you to do, I hate you. I'm upset. So love is a transaction, a deal. As long as you tell me nice things, you bring me flowers, you're nice to me, then I'm happy. And no matter how much you've done, the moment you stop, then I go, oh, what's wrong? Why don't you love me anymore? This is never love. It's just a deal. And that's not love. Exactly. So it's up to you. You need to turn it around for yourself. And here's the thing, is that even if you become loving, like you love yourself and you're giving love, see, when you're giving love, what do you get to feel? Love. So in the giving is the receiving. The thing is that even if you can give love, you have love to give, the other one, you can't possibly give it to them. Because it's up to them to give themselves love. And, if you're expecting yourself to be able to give love to others, like with your children, you want to give love and have them nourish off that love. It's up to them to give themselves love. If you expect them to be able to receive love from you, then you're making them dependent on you. Now, it's perfectly okay to love, but ultimately it's up to them to learn how to love themselves and not just feed off of your love, right? Does that make sense? So that now shows us that we can't give love to others or receive love from others. Not really. It's up to us to give ourselves love. That's the only place where we can go for to get it. Yeah, but it's up to you. It's your responsibility. And we're all responsible for ourselves. And if you think that your children are dependent on your love, then you're making them a slave to it. You're not showing them how to love themselves. And then they need it from you. And the moment you're not there, what are they going to do? And no matter how much you give it, she can't receive it. And again, that proves you can't give it to somebody else. It's not like a commodity. You can't hand it to them. You can love her and love her and love her, but it's up to her to feel it for herself. And that's what Lester discovered that started him down this whole path. Because, like I said, the first thing he noticed was all the times when he was miserable, when he was looking for love from others. Whereas all the times when he was happy and everything was prosperous for him was when he was given it. And he saw that, how much he was looking for love from his family, from his partners, his relationships. And he suddenly noticed that he had his family's respect. He had their love, but he wasn't feeling it. They were giving it to him, but he couldn't accept it. It was impossible. So then he had to let go of looking for it, wanting it. And that's how he turned himself around. So that's what we must teach our children. To be self-sufficient. To give themselves love. Then they got it made. So yes, love your daughter and give, but just know that she's her own master. She's her own infinite being. And whatever's in her consciousness is up to her. And by loving, all we can do is just point the way. But they have to take it. That's why, there's certain masters Like, anyone hear of Amma? Yeah, from India. She's also known as the hugging saint. She's a master, and she lives in India, down in Kerala, and she has a big worldwide organization, and she goes traveling around the world, and she does something called darshan, where she, hugs you. And you feel a lift because there's just this beingness. And that's what we do. When we are loving, we're just kind of showing the way. And everybody's an infinite being. And so when you are coming from that place, it wakes it up in others. The thing is that you can't give it to anybody. You can just kind of show them the way. But it's up to them to do it. The problem is a lot of people, and I hung around her a lot, and a lot of people get dependent on that. And they put her up on a pedestal. And they think that she's doing it for them. And that is a huge mistake. Because if a master could, all they would do is just come by and tap you on your head and you'd be free. But they can't. They could just be an example, and you have to do it for yourself. And incidentally, that's why Lester came up with the 6 steps. He didn't do it immediately. You see, Lester, he went free in 1952. He went free in 3 months. He didn't know what he was doing. He was just kind of following the bouncing ball. He just stumbled into it. He went free. And for a while, see, he lived in New York City. And for a while, he stayed there. And to him, everything was perfect and harmonious. And there's audios where he talks about that time. How everything was, there was no limitation. Everything was in harmony. So in New York City, which is even more crowded than Bucharest, right? Traffic and all that. He never got caught in traffic, no matter what time of day it was. He never hit a red light. Anytime he needed a parking spot, he always had a parking spot. Even policemen and taxi drivers, they would vacate their spot to give it to him. They didn't know why. It just felt good. And in the island of Manhattan, there's bridges that get clogged up. And he would be driving across the bridge. It'd be packed with cars. And even though it was jam-packed with cars, there's like no way where would the cars go. They would just still part like the Red Sea, and he would just drive straight through the bridge. That's the way he lived. He talks about it. It's kind of mind-boggling. But like I said, don't believe him or anything, but check it out. Take it for checking. And he was living like that in New York. Also, he was experiencing so much joy that was actually disturbing, if you can imagine that. He had so much positive energy. He had to walk it off for hours in the middle of the night. He had so much energy. He just walked and walked and walked. But living in New York City, he saw that his happiness was actually disturbing to others because it stirred up their garbage, him being so positive. And people didn't like it. They're like, what are you smiling about? Right? So he just decided, you know what? It's bothering people. I'm gonna go someplace else. And when I said that, first he fixed his body, he fixed his heart, then he found the same principle, fixed his finances. He'd accumulated like 14 buildings in Manhattan for no money. He had assets worth millions. And then when he decided to leave, he gave it all away. He said that he gave it to people who he knew were kind people and would take care of the tenants in the buildings. But he just gave it away. Why? Because he knew he could just create it anytime he wanted. Didn't need to hold on to anything. And so he gave it all away. He packed up a few belongings in a trailer behind his car, and then he drove out west. His intention was to go to San Diego, but along the way he drove through Sedona, Arizona, and decided to stop there. And he took his little camper out into the middle of the desert. See, he could manifest any time. He acquired several pieces of land in this beautiful desert surrounded by these gorgeous red mountains. Just manifested it. And the way he put it was he parked his body there. He isolated himself out in the middle of the desert, miles and miles away from civilization. Where, it was difficult to even get there. And he just sat under a tree. He said he sat under an apple tree. And if an apple fell from the tree, he ate it. And if it didn't, he didn't eat it. And he went traveling the universe because he was interested in that. He wanted to explore and see other forms of life and whatever. Now, there are words used in other teachings for this state. Probably the most recognizable one that we know of that's used is called samadhi. Have you ever heard of that term in Indian teachings? He was in samadhi. And he was just experiencing his infinite being, his oneness. And he was out there for years until one day some hippies stumbled upon him. Little Lester sitting out in the middle of the desert. And they reminded him of a deal that he made with himself when he went free, that he was going to show others the way. So then he picked himself up and he started to integrate himself again with people. And he formed a couple of groups. There are a couple of groups in New York, a couple of groups in California that he would meet with regularly. And he would talk to them like Eckhart Tolle talks. And if you hear some of those recordings from Lester, those are a lot of those talks were from that time. And he didn't have the method. He didn't have the 6 steps at that time. He was just talking about beingness, just like Eckhart Tolle does. The thing is that he would meet with these groups, have a session with them, talking with them, and they would get nice and high. They would start to open up. And then he would leave. He would come back like 3 or 6 months later, and they wouldn't grow. And they would want to hang out with him and get high again, listening to him talk. And he said, well, they're just becoming dependent on me. They're not doing it themselves. They're just getting off on hearing me talk. That's no good. And then that's when he looked at, okay, what did I do? How can I show them how to do what I did? And then in an instant, a split second, he came up with the 6 steps. And he wrote it down on the back of a Ramana Maharshi book. Just exactly that, what we have there. And then that is when he started to form what he called the Sedona method at the time, and set up an organization to teach it. So instead of having a guru or someone do it for you, now the method itself is the guru. And Lester was adamant about not being special. He didn't want anybody to put him up on a pedestal, to think that he did it for him. That's why in none of these recordings you'll ever hear Lester working with anybody. Now, a lot of the recordings were back before. You just hear him just talking about truth and stuff, which is nice. But there are some recordings you'll start to hear him refer to the method, letting go of the wanting, approval, control, and safety, talk about ag flap, and so on. But even then, you'll never hear him working with anybody. He always had the teachers do it because he didn't want people to think that he did it for them. And that's why when we do this, work here, a lot of the work we do is we partner you up to work together. So you do the work yourself. And that way, you got it. And you are your own guru. You can find your own way using the method. In fact, Lester, a lot of his talks, they would put a lot of his quotes and discussions and wrote it down and put it into a book called The Ultimate Truth, or The Keys to Ultimate Freedom. And when they put this book together, he insisted not to use his name at first. He didn't want his name on there. And so what he did was he said, all right, well, I'm frank. You know that term, to be frank? Just like to be, simple and so on. He goes, well, I'm frank in the way I talk, and my name is Lester. So he said, let's just put as the author, Frank Lester. And he set up this big retreat center in Sedona, and they were doing retreats there for a number of years. And then there was this big thing where one of his teachers turned against him and destroyed the whole thing. And he let it go because he said, rather than fix a thing, I'm going to let the graduates that want to fight for it and keep it, I'm going to let them find their way. So they don't have to be dependent on me, and they can move forward. So he just let it go. A master has no attachments and no aversions. He didn't fight to keep it. He just let it go and continued on. A couple of his teachers moved forward. See, he gave them the opportunity to empower themselves. And one of his teachers, Larry Crane, continued to, after Lester went ahead and left, he transcended, Larry continued to work really hard to keep the retreat center going. And he was trying to sustain it by having other groups come in, other spiritual groups go there so they could do their workshops and stuff. And he told a story one time where there was, I think, like a Ramana Maharshi group that were practicing their thing. And they had this really big poster of Ramana Maharshi in the room. And while they were away one day, Larry saw, like the big poster of Ramana Maharshi, and he decided to put a little picture of Lester next to him. Because they're just two masters. He's just doing it to be nice and so on. But the picture of Lester kept getting knocked over. You put it back up, and it get knocked over again. Lester didn't want to be special. And there's also relatively few pictures of Lester. Some people told stories where there were group photos and Lester was in the picture, in the group. But when they took the picture, he didn't appear in the picture. Like a vampire. And people wanted to take pictures with him, very few, because he just didn't want to do that. And in some of the talks, he says, people call me a teacher. He goes, I'm not a teacher. What are you talking about? What am I teaching? He goes, that's ridiculous. I'm not teaching anything. Because how ridiculous is it for an infinite being to teach another infinite being how to be infinite? Here we are, all infinite beings, go listening to someone else talk about how to be infinite. What are you talking about? And the thing is the more you release, it's just natural. That's what I feel too. And I look at like some of these other gurus and experts and so on, and they write books. And then people go to them, will you sign the book? And they go signing the books and stuff. I was like, it's like the weirdest thing. Signing a book. See, it takes an ego to do that. And so what we're here to do is let go of our own garbage so we see who we are.